Meanwhile, Democratic presidential candidate Senator Barack Obama outlining a controversial and expensive anti-terror plan in Chicago today. That is where Steve Brown has the very latest. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Neil. From the get-go, Senator Obama attempted to draw some very clear foreign policy distinctions between himself and President Bush.
For the last 6 years, the position of leader of the free world has remained open. And it is time to fill that role once more.
And as president, Democratic candidate Barack Obama says his candidacy would differ greatly from President Bush's. In a morning speech today in Chicago, the Illinois senator outlined the things an Obama White House would do when it comes to foreign policy, including doubling the amount of aid the U.S. gives to foreign countries as a way to combat terrorism.
I will double our annual investments in meeting these challenges to $50 billion by 2012. And ensure that those new resources are directed towards these strategic goals.
Obama says the fight against terrorism needs to include more aid to nations where water, food, and health care are scarce to prevent terrorism from getting a foothold or spreading. Obama, who traveled to Africa last year, says disconnected corners of the world have the greatest potential to become breeding grounds for terrorism. Oddly enough, this is also the position of the Bush administration, which has tried to, and in some cases succeeded in doing these exact same sorts of things. That similarity came as no surprise to one longtime presidential observer.
When it comes to presidential politics, there really aren't a whole lot of new ideas. There's a lot of talk about new ideas, but to go back to a phrase that was used in the '84 presidential campaign, where's the beef?
And another question to be asked is where does the money come from? Senator Obama was not clear as to where that additional $20 to $25 billion would come from. But it is his position, given America's position in the world and how it's viewed, that someone new in the White House with additional spending might be able to foster some more goodwill and perhaps some more good anti-terrorism efforts. Neil?
Thank you, Steve. Well, if my next guest is right, Senator Obama's plans to use tax dollars to fight terror will only end up fueling more terror. He's Michael Evans. Michael is the author of The Final Move Beyond Iraq. But former Clinton anti-terror director Eddy disagrees. So, Mike, why do you fear that this could make things worse?
Well, you're feeding it. Clinton did it in 2001. The only foreign policy decision in the Middle East was a $10 billion check to Arafat. It sent a signal to terrorists that crime pays, and it pays big. We got slammed. You can't feed terrorists. Listen, most of these Democrats who are shooting their mouth off have never been to Iraq except in the bubble, the green zone. I've been there twice, Neil, in the last couple months. You meet with the Iraqi people and you find out what's going on. It's not quite the same.
So you've heard this attack, that it's a good intention, but a foolish one.
Well, it depends on what the details are. I'm not sure that Mr. Evans has got it right or even half right. You can spend money on foreign aid, and you can do it in a really aggressive way that promotes American values and promotes dignity across the world, and actually will help reduce a lot of the things that are creating more terrorists. I mean, Al-Qaeda has become a marketing organization, and if we're going to fight that war, we need to fight a war of ideas, and we have to market back.
But
and
we
that's
gave a lot of money
dollar
to Afghanistan prior to 9/11, right? To help lift up the poor there. And
I'm not sure that's the case.
Was there are folks that plan this big attack?
Right. Well, there are spots around the world, Afghanistan being a good example, or Somalia or others, and it's not our fault, and maybe it's not our role to have to fix it, but the lack of government infrastructure leads to a swamp, and then Al-Qaeda rolls in and is able to recruit and have a safe haven from which they can plan and base attacks.
Well, Michael, what do you make it? It's a good point, Michael. What do you make of that argument that, you know, in an area of economic squalor and desperation, this evil is allowed to rise? So if we were to address that, there's less likelihood of evil rising.
Well, the point is they don't believe in evil. They consider these people a human rights movement. You simply feed them.
Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. In the little streets of Belfast, in the dark of early morn, British soldiers came running, breaking little homes with scorn. Hear the sobs of crying children, dragging fathers from their bed. Watch the scene as helpless mothers watch the blood fall from their heads. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Not for them a judge or jury, or indeed a crime at all. Being Irish means they're guilty, so they're guilty one and all. Round the world, a truth.
Listen, Carter did it. It was an Islamic revolution in '79 that tore the hell out of Iran in the world that we're faced with. It's the same revolution that we're dealing with right now in Iraq. I write about it in the book. It's an Islamic revolution. We have a serious problem until they define evil and realize there's some people you can't feed. They're our enemies. They want to kill us.
What do you make of that? That there's some people for whom all good intentions eventually never.
I don't think we disagree. I'm not entirely sure what the point is he's trying to make, but a foreign policy that's based on assistance to friendly countries and, for example, getting rid of madrasas in Pakistan and Afghanistan that preach hate. As I said, Al-Qaeda is a marketing tool. They're spreading deception and they're spreading an anti-American rhetoric around the world. If we spend our dollars well, we can go into certain countries and we can make sure that the schools aren't teaching Al-Qaeda messages, but are actually teaching a pro-Western message.
But you're trying to buy them off to like us, right?
No, no. Why? I'm not saying we buy the leadership of 747.
But you're buying them off to not say bad things about us, right?
I don't think I'd call it buying it off. Would you say going into Russia and giving them money to protect nuclear material is buying them off?
All right, well, that's a very good point. What do you make of that, Michael, that if you use the Russian example, that there is some good to come of that if you recognize the fact that if you don't, things could get a lot worse?
Listen, the Russians are creating problems for us in Iran. We need to deal with them with strength. Pelosi went to Syria and had tea. I was with Iraqi government officials. They said, shut the camera off, Mike. Pelosi's getting your troops killed by having tea with terrorists. She wants to give them money. She wants to dialogue with them. And that tells the terrorist cartel, strike America. They're afraid of us. They're weak.
All right. Michael, I want to thank you. RP, very good seeing you.
You're welcome.
We'll continue this debate another day. Up next, perhaps.